All right, Hell from Indy. Do a quick video on Mopar cooling today. I've been watching YouTube videos like y'all do a lot, and I've watched a few of them lately where guys had some big problems with their cooling systems, and it was very predictable that they were going to have problems with their cooling system. And I'll just share a few tips on what I do for cooling, especially the Mopar big block, and especially a 440, because man, them dudes are just, they're heat sinks. But anyway, I've never had problems with these, with the 440s, any of the big blocks, 383s, whatever. And I'm old enough that these were actually my daily drivers when I was younger. So, I've driven them every day. Likewise, this car here, since I've done the 440 swap, I have no problems with it running hot. It runs perfect. No issues whatsoever. And so I'm going to share what I do with you, and you can do something different. I'm just showing you what I do, and just as a suggestion. So first thing I do is I always just use a factory cast iron water pump housing. Now, if you can find one of the old Mopar aluminum water pump housings, those were really good, very high quality pieces. You just don't see them anymore. And if you do, they're usually a premium. I would like to have one, but this works just fine. It's a little heavier, well, quite a bit heavier, I guess, but it works just fine. But the reason I like the factory units is it's machined properly. Everything fits properly, so you're getting the correct water circulation, and that's a good place to start. Next is, get down in here so you can see it, but I always use a clutch fan. Whether I have AC or not, I use one of those fans for two reasons. Number one is I noticed a long time ago that not always, but a lot of times on the 440s that were in trucks or RVs, regardless of whether they had AC or not, would sometimes have these clutch fans. Not always, but quite often. And of course, I put two and two together and thought that must be for maximum cooling. The second thing I've noticed about, well, I haven't noticed, I learned or was taught, was that the clutch fan is going to have the least draw on your horsepower. And how I know that is it's dyno proven. If you watch Engine Masters on Motor Trend, they did an episode where they did fans on engines, and they found that this clutch fan, to my utter surprise, was the best fan for running a high-performance engine. And I'll admit, when I was younger, the first thing we did was we took those off for just a fixed blade because we thought these were worse, and well, we were mistaken. Next, you can see I've got a fan shroud that fits properly. You can see how you have a little bit of the blade sticking out, and then the proper clearance. And you want to get that right, and then that's huge. That makes a big difference right there. Lastly is I have the 26-inch factory radiator. Not all of you are going to be able to do that because some of your cars came with the smaller radiator from the factory. But if you can do this, again, never have any problems. I like these factory radiators too. They can be recorded. It's getting hard to find a place that can do it. But the tank is very easily removed and record, or just removed, and you can have your radiator cleaned. A lot of people like to do the modern aluminum with the fans. And that's okay if that's what you want to do. I prefer the factory setup, and have just found that the other is not necessary in any weather, any temperature. Honestly, guys, I've never had any problem with cooling. But I know why people do. Why a lot of people do. If you deviate from what I've shown you, you're going to have problems. If you don't have a shroud, or it's improper, or the fan, or your radiator needs cleaned, flush, whatever, everything's got to be properly maintained. But I'm going to show you the big thing that I see happen a lot, and as soon as I see people doing it, I'm like, well, he's getting ready to have overheating problems. So years ago, I had an engine, and I was doing a swap, and I had everything apart, and I put a garden hose in the engine, wasn't even in the car, and just flushed out the cooling system. I flushed it, everything was spotless clean. Pressure washed the engine so I could paint it. Pressure washed it inside, spotless, not a problem. And I got to thinking, I thought, you know, you've got this thing out. Why don't you go ahead and put new freeze plugs in it now instead of waiting and having a problem later? So I knocked the freeze plugs out and was shocked of all the thick clay-like baby poo that was inside the cooling system. I thought, well, how's that possible? I was flushing it. Well, I have found, and you guys know how many 440s come in and out of this garage. A huge number of them, if they're pulled and they sit, will have that thick, nasty goo, and you will not flush it out any way. There's two ways to flush it out. Take the core plugs out, flush it that way, because then you can get to everything, right? And it's in the backs where I'm talking that stuff's at. And you can flush it that way, then put new plugs in. Or you put the engine in the car and get it running and get it hot, and it will break loose and fill your radiator up in no time at all. That's the other way to do it. And so, like I said, most of the engines I pull, and you guys know how many of them, most of them have that. If you remember the 400 I had a couple years ago, when I pulled it apart, the block was still caked and packed full of castings, the foundry sand. It had everything clogged up. And I always felt bad for whoever bought that car new. It came out of a Cordoba, I believe. No, it came out of a Charger, like a 77 Charger. I assure you that that car from the day it was delivered had overheating problems that they were never able to fix. And they were never happy with that car, just because it was full of that foundry cack. So anyway, so yeah, you watch these videos on YouTube, and they get an engine and they just throw it in there real quick, and then it's a disaster. They put an aluminum radiator in there and they still can't. That's what's going on. They've not flushed it. I highly, highly recommend that you do that. So, okay, well, that's about all I can think. I think you guys kind of get the point. But if you'll do that, you'll flush it, use a good quality housing, make sure everything fits properly and is well maintained. You won't have any problem at all with your 440 cooling system. All right, later.